Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Missing Frames. This is the podcast where we watch all the movies we should have seen by this point in our lives. I'm your host, Shawn Eastridge. We're hanging out on the Nerd Party Network, a collection of podcasts dedicated to all things entertainment. Make sure you're following us on X, Twitter. I don't like calling it X. I'll just put that out there. So X, it's at Join Nerd Party. We're on Blue Sky now. I'm not on Blue Sky, but the Nerd Party is. I think it's just the Nerd Party. I should probably know that too, but I don't. I haven't been paying attention to any Blue Sky stuff. And then we're on Facebook and Instagram at the Nerd Party. And more importantly, we are here right now. It's happening. We're recording an episode, and I am thrilled to welcome back to the show my dear friend who has not been on in a minute, in many, many moons, because that's a space reference for you, Amber, in case you're wondering. But we've got Ambre Trujillo back on the show. Welcome back, Amber.
Thank you. It's so great to be back, and I cannot believe it's been so long. It literally blows my mind and gives me a little bit of an existential meltdown thinking about time. So thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think we realized it was Star Trek 2. We did Star Trek 2 maybe in 2022 or 2023.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I don't like that either. It just makes me feel sad. We're in contact like sporadically, so it doesn't necessarily feel like that. But when you really start to think about it, it does send you down that kind of existential black hole. And you're like, what is going on?
Yeah.
COVID really, this is something you should look into, I think, is COVID really sent us into like a time vortex where time in general does not function the way it used to, I think.
Should we start this conspiracy?
We should start this conspiracy. It's happening. It's going on right now.
Okay.
But I know that doesn't really have anything to do with outer space, but I'm sure you can find a way. It has something to do with inner space, the inner space of our souls.
Time has everything to do with space. That is a whole other tangent that we can talk about. But time, it's space-time. Space-time are beautifully
the
connected.
Space-time continuum.
Yes.
You're right. See, you're the expert. This is why I have you on. And speaking of space and time and existential crises, we're watching a film that I don't think has anything to do with any of those things. Well, the existential crisis part.
Definitely.
Possibly. Yes. But that film is the 2001 Ron Howard film, A Beautiful Mind. And I paused for a second because he won an Oscar. Ron Howard, I think, won his first Oscar for this.
As he should. It's one of my favorite films of all time. So
yes, we have been talking about doing this for a while, as it's one of your favorite films. Mm-hmm. I have never seen it, and I was teasing before we started recording that there's a terrible, very, very nerdy reason for why I have not seen it. I need to know, and I need you to tell me. You're ready?
I'm ready. I've already prepped. When you started to say that, I was like, okay, this is how we're starting because I need to know. You can't just leave that Easter egg with me, and I'd have to sit with it the rest of the show. So
you might walk away from your computer when I tell you this. You might. I think many people will turn this off when they hear this. So, A Beautiful Mind came out 2001. Mm-hmm. 2001 was a major year in my life. I don't know. Do you happen to know there were some major films released in 2001 that I feel kind of changed the landscape?
I could not tell you. I could not tell you what.
I'm going to tell you right now.
Okay.
The film that for me just blew my mind wide open was The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. It's the first entry of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it is to this day my favorite film. So when I saw that, it just completely blew me away. And really, like, once The Lord of the Rings came out, we started getting like DVDs and behind the scenes content of like what goes into the process of making films in a way we'd not really seen before, not that extensively. So I was very obsessed with Lord of the Rings. It was the first time a film I was obsessed with got nominated for many. It was nominated for 13 Academy Awards. I think it won a few of them, and it did not win Best Picture. Do you know the film that won Best Picture in its place?
I would say it was A Beautiful Mind.
It was A Beautiful Mind, Amber. And I was so bitter that A Beautiful Mind beat The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, for Best Picture, that I have for 24 years now actively refused to watch this film.
I see that. I see the frustration and you wanting to take it out on A Beautiful Mind for the last 24 years. I would be I don't remember that, but I totally get it.
Oh, I remember
just
it.
ask that when you're watching A Beautiful Mind, do not be like comparing it to Lord of the Rings because you're going to
Where's
rewatch
Aragorn? There's no swords. There are no like short people with hairy feet. Like this is a disaster. No, I learned very quickly that I was like, if I compare any movie with Lord of the Rings, I'm bound to be disappointed. But this was like it was a petty tirade and vendetta that I have held true to for that many years, a quarter of a century.
I'm going to start calling you Sean Petty.
Please. Oh my God, bless you, Amber. Thank you so much. You have no idea how happy that made me and would make me if you call me that. I think I would have gone through my entire life just being sort of willful about not seeing it, because I also have not seen Chicago, the film that won Best Picture in 2002 and beat The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, the second film in the trilogy.
Wow.
Thankfully, by the third year, the Academy had gotten their act together and they gave The Lord of the Rings all the Oscars for the final film. So it was that kind of healed my soul.
As they should have.
Yeah. I mean, it was just Chicago. If someone as amazing and as awesome as you wants to sit down and make me watch Chicago, I'll do it. But really, I think unless you had come to me and said, you know what, this is one of my favorite movies, I really want to watch it, we should do this for Missing Frames, I probably would have continued along this nerdy path paved by my teenage self that I have, like this torch that I've clung to for all these years. So
well, I'm so happy that I'm the person to have opened up your mind to even wanting to watch this film, because it is good. I do like it.
I have wanted to watch it. I will not lie to you. This is one of those that I'm like, I'm going to watch it eventually. Maybe I was being a little dramatic about this stuff. Back then I was definitely like, I was firmly like, no, I will not. I will stand by my goal and this promise that I've made to myself. But I love Ron Howard. Russell Crowe's great. It's a film I have been interested in seeing, but I don't know too much about it. Do you remember? I know some amount about it, but obviously not a whole lot. But do you remember when you first saw this and how it kind of affected you? And you are very, very into a lot of some of this amazing, like super cerebral, mathematical, scientific stuff. So was this an early stepping stone to that for you?
You know what? I have no idea when I first watched it. I like a lot of Ron Howard's films. My other favorite is, of course, Apollo 13. I also love Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons. That book series kind of got me into sort of like that thriller kind of genre of books. But so I really loved Ron Howard. I don't remember when I first watched A Beautiful Mind, but I really, really love movies that highlight real people, especially within the academic or the cerebral community. And I just thought that it was super well done. It was just a super profound film. I don't know how much I should tell you.
Don't tell me too much.
Well,
let me tell you what I know. So typically on Missing Frames, we'll have a point where we try to predict the plot of the film. I know enough. Is the guy's name Nash? Is it Nash?
Yes.
Okay.
John
good.
Nash.
So this is a true story, or based on a true story. I know that Jennifer Connelly is in it. He is a professor. I don't know if is he a mathematics professor? I don't know.
Okay,
No,
I don't know
I
what
don't know.
tell you.
You can
Okay.
tell me nothing. All right. So he's a professor, I know that much, but he's also like a paranoid schizophrenic or something. I know he hallucinates and he sees things, and it kind of like it's some people feel like, or maybe he feels it's part of what feeds his brilliance, and it also like is detrimental to his health and safety and the people around him. So my guess is, it's a biopic about this guy who is a brilliant man but struggles with these personal demons and this illness he has. His wife is there to, you know, kind of be the butt of his behavior and kind of pick up the pieces, but also push him in the direction of healing, I imagine. And my feeling is that he will hopefully get the help he needs by the end and find a way to reconcile these components of his mind that is kind of scattered and fractured a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't want to give too much away, but John Nash's story is absolutely brilliant. And it is such a commentary. One of the things, other than space, that I really love to learn about is the human brain. I love neurology. I love kind of challenging like perception and just exploring the human mind and reality. Like, what is reality? What does it mean to be human? And it's those types of films that really I gravitate towards. But John Nash's story, I want to talk more about it after we see it, because it really is just a fascinating story of a human being with a mental illness that
perseveres or tries to push through to accomplish
yeah.
something amazing. I do this thing, just talking about like biopics and real life people who are adapted for whatever, like a semi-fictional story, like typically a film version is not going to be completely accurate to the real life tale, and it shouldn't be. It's an adaptation of whatever that story is. But I find that, like, if I don't know, like in this case, I don't know much about John Nash at all, if anything, really. And I found that, like, because I love film so much, I think I may have talked about this in a prior episode. It may have been the Hamilton episode I did with my wife, but like not really knowing Alexander Hamilton's story, and almost like uh maybe subconsciously avoiding the story so that I can go into the film experience completely fresh and like a blank slate. So it's like, this is going to be my first exposure to this story. I can enjoy the film to its fullest, and then afterwards I can research and find out, oh, what was true, what was exaggerated, like what things are, and then go in and delve deeper into that. Do you do that at all, or you just seem like somebody who is so fascinated with this world that you were like, I just want to find everything out? And I'm thinking of it as just a film nerd, and like, I want to see the movie and not get spoiled on it, even
I
if
think
it's a real life person.
I think it's hard, right? I didn't know who John Nash was before I watched the movie, and it caused me to really go into a deep dive to try to figure out, who he was. And I also really like to watch interviews of people that have biopics about them, the people that are around when there's video. But I also I enjoy historical figures, especially the founding fathers. So I like to read about that. My boyfriend Joseph is obsessed with that. So from kind of like him, I've been like, oh yeah, I'm gonna like dive into this a little bit too. So it's a little bit hit or miss whether or not I have prior knowledge of people before I watch a film. But I do know that it will affect whether or not I like the film, for sure.
Yeah. We've talked, sorry to interrupt, but we've talked about this a little bit, and not to go off on like a potentially controversial tangent, and we don't have to delve too deeply into it.
Yeah.
But you and I have discussed Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, and you were a little less than enamored with the film, partially, I think, because you are very familiar with the Manhattan Project and just that entire story.
Yeah, the atomic age in general is another thing that I love to learn about. So yeah, I think that when you watch a film without having a lot of backstory of the person, you have a better just like you go in fresh, as you say, and it kind of, your opinion is for sure shaped by whether or not you know the person, whether it's a real person or a fictional person, like Superman, right? So it's
Yeah.
like you're going to go in and you're going to be like, that's not the story. Like they're missing something from it. But with John Nash, he wasn't someone that was super known out, like as far as
Right.
like an intellect to the everyday person, versus someone like, you know, maybe Oppenheimer or even Bill Nye, you know, Neil deGrasse Tyson, any of these other people, Jane Goodall, like you have this idea of who they are. But I really like biopics of lesser known intellects as
Yeah.
well. There's a Indian film. It's not an Indian film, but it's based on an Indian mathematician, and it's escaping me. I'm gonna have to look it up. But that's another film that kind of has the same um, feel as A Beautiful Mind. He doesn't suffer from illness, but it's more of, maybe I gravitate more towards underdog stories.
Yeah.
I really resonate with that underdog. So this is, I kind of get that from this film as well. The intellect and the, you know, the mathematics and learning about you know, what he studied and what, you know, happened in his life is really interesting. But anything having to do with underdogs is something that I really love too.
Yeah. You bring up a great point. I think it's not just about like true stories adapted, or like, you know, in your case, like the scientific community, famous members of that community and their stories being brought to the screen. I mean, it's just the nature of adaptations in general. How many times have you heard somebody say like, oh, I liked the movie, but the book was so much better, or da, da, da.
Yes,
You know, you're
I
right.
try not to be that person, being a book person, being like, but the book, like
Right. But you
I
can,
try my
sometimes you
hardest.
can't help it. Sometimes you like, you're like, ah, but this thing, and you know, and I'm so glad you brought up Superman, because I'm always happy when anyone brings up Superman. But like, it is like, you know, the danger becomes the more obsessively you get into a particular subject,
Right.
the more you know about it. And then the more you can nitpick a story that doesn't necessarily meet your standard of what you know about it. And sometimes it's just like, look, the life is way more fascinating than this film presents. And not
Mm.
to, you know, I just did a wonderful episode. I had a great conversation with Spencer Tweedy about the Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown, that just came out with Timothée Chalamet.
Yeah.
And I am a massive Bob Dylan fan. And I
Mm.
think that kind of hurt my appreciation of the film, because I went into it probably like you did with Oppenheimer, which is you were
Yeah.
kind of like, I don't know what they were going for with this, and why did they do that? And there's so much more to this, and da da da. That's kind of my feeling with Bob Dylan. And I think with people like John Nash, like, you're right. Like, I don't think before this film, he was probably not top of mind for the general populace. I don't think
Right.
I'd heard of him. I'm not sure many people had heard of him before this film. So that does, I think, there is something nice about that. There is something nice when you can showcase these smaller stories that aren't like the A-list celebrities of the
Right.
world of academia. And you can say like, there are amazing stories happening to just quote unquote regular, everyday, ordinary people that we don't hear as much. And those stories are worth elevating as well. And
Yeah,
then, like, because you don't know as much about them, in some ways they become more enjoyable. There's less pressure on those films.
for sure. And I think that's what you know, you're gonna experience with The Beautiful Mind as well. But I just hope that you don't compare it to Lord of the Rings.
I will do my best. I am genuinely, I think this is a vendetta that it's long overdue for me to kind of put it to rest. This is overcoming demons and growing as a human being. I'm very excited for you to be a part of this this experience,
I'm,
this experience of growth, and I feel like I'm maturing as a human being right before your eyes, before the world's eyes. It's really all thanks to you.
yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
I think you're just like, yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm pretty much the best. Yeah.
Yes.
Let's go. We are going to watch it, and then we'll be back to discuss my thoughts and your thoughts as well.
Now available to own on video cassette.
All right, we're back. Amber, I am pleased to say that despite the fact you're already laughing, despite the fact that this is no Lord of the Rings, I think we knew that going into it.
Sorry.
I did really, really enjoy A Beautiful Mind.
Oh, good.
Yes.
I'm glad to hear it.
I think enough time and distance between the anger I felt when it beat Lord of the Rings for the Oscars. I'm ready. I was ready. I was open. I was willing to accept what the movie had to give to me, and I really enjoyed it. I have some like feelings about it, both good and bad. But I wanted to see first and foremost how you feel about it now, if anything has changed, or let me get your thoughts.
Something big has changed.
Oh,
I decided to read the book. Now, the book, A Beautiful Mind by Sylvia Nasser, I actually didn't read the book because I was like, this isn't going to come in time. So I got the audiobook. It is 18 hours long. And I was able to, I have like 4 hours left.
Did you do like a 2 times speed listening?
Oh, I did 1.5. 2 times is too much for me.
It's too much. It's like chipmunk level.
Yeah. I don't understand how people can absorb that information that fast. But I definitely did at least 1.5. And holy moly, do I have a different complete, I wouldn't, maybe not complete, but definitely a different outlook on the film now. And I think going forward, whenever I watch a biopic on anybody, I'm going to follow up with research done on it. It's interesting though, because Sylvia Nasser's A Beautiful Mind book, she interviewed hundreds of people that were around John Nash during his life, but didn't actually interview John Nash because he wouldn't let her.
Okay,
so,
interesting.
However, there's a couple things with that. One is that she did a phenomenal job. Holy cow. She really went into deep research. I think she researched for something like 2.5 years.
Wow.
Just on interviewing people. And after the book came out, from my understanding, John Nash actually reached out to her and asked her if they could be friends and like go out to dinner. And he refused to have interviews on the record, but he would chat with her at dinners and conferences and such. But it was an interesting book, and I definitely have a different view on John Nash now.
Yeah, that's what always happens with these things. That was my thought after the movie ended. I was like, I would love to read the book. And I think I will read the book at some point. And it's mostly because biopics, and this is a particular brand of biopic. Ron Howard is an amazing filmmaker. He's made
biopic. I've been saying biopic.
It's probably biopic, honestly.
Is it like a Uranus kind of
it's exactly
moment?
It's whatever if you believe it and you say it with conviction, the audience just goes, sure. Except in my case, one thing that Missing Frames followers and fans know is that I will on a regular basis mispronounce a plethora. That's another word that I constantly mispronounce. I don't know if it's plethora or plethora, of words. Right so that's it. So I'm constantly mispronouncing things. So it can be whatever you want as long as you believe. Biopic. Let's go with biopic because you're way smarter than me. Biopic. Ron Howard's a great filmmaker. He's made some of the best films I've ever seen. Some of our great films. And this film, I think, does not quite transcend the biopic curse. Some of the biopic curses in that you see it with kind of Oscar baity films of this variety. You know what I
For
mean?
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are things in this film that feel like very much like, oh, they were gunning for the Oscar. Like they wanted that gold so badly. So on that level, I was watching it thinking like, okay, some of this stuff has got to be like definitely exaggerated, maybe just outright false. And
Right.
that's not a problem. I mean, to me, I'm like, look, I want even if it's an adaptation or a depiction of a true story, I
Mhm.
want the film to work on its own terms. I want to be entertained. I want to be impressed by the technique, by everything involved, and I want to enjoy it. And then after the fact, like you did, I want to go out and then like start to nitpick and say like, oh, is this true? Is that true?
Yeah.
Sometimes that does shape how you feel about the film afterwards. And I'm very curious to see what details you dug up that may have affected your opinion. All that said, I enjoyed the film, but could tell like some of the stuff I was like, I don't know if I buy into this, or this just feels
Mm.
like it's embellished a little bit more than uh, maybe a I don't want to say a better film would have been, but I think this leans into some of the more uh, obvious tendencies of a film like this.
I will say this film, based on his story, was the film that they could show in theaters. So it was the part of his life that people, because during that time, it's not like the film industry is now, in the sense that there's some older films that have that kind of like The Godfather and those sort of films that have the same that have a little bit more of a brash or gruesome kind of take on it. But they definitely went for the part of his life that was Oscar worthy, if you
The
will.
feel good
Because,
portion. It's like
yeah,
what they're telling is the this was a man who was plagued by he was so like he had this amazing intellect and accomplished so much and
yeah.
went through so much
But
and
I
he
will say that part they actually got right.
yes.
It's the elements of the stories, a lot of things that they left out.
Yeah.
It's the things that they left out that I think was uh, the biggest embellishments, and the hallucinations part of it. So John Nash actually never, as far as we know, or as far as the book states, he didn't experience visual hallucinations at all.
I
But
saw that, right.
yeah, yeah. So I think I was mulling over this, right? Because I also have a thing about biopics, or anything that has
How about
to.
this? I'll say biopic because it's your way, and you can say biopic, and that way we're covering all our bases and we're
We'll just cover it
respecting
that
one
way.
another. Yes.
Um, but I do have this. As I was watching, as I rewatched the film and I read the book, it forced me to reflect on the story, right? And where filmmakers have like this huge responsibility, right, to balance creative storytelling with that factual accuracy. And it's really important not to perpetuate stereotypes. And I do think that they perpetuated some stereotypes in this film. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it would be easier to see what you questioned in the film, and I can provide like what I've learned from the book itself, because there's so
Sure.
much. Shawn, there's so much. I can't even. I encourage anybody who has watched A Beautiful Mind and has not read the book to read the book, because even though I still have 4 hours left, I was so enamored by the book, and I have not been enamored by a book in so long. So definitely recommend to read it and then rewatch the film.
Yeah, I think that's a great recommendation, and I will definitely be doing that. Like I said, at some point. So I'll just focus on it from a storytelling perspective, and
Yeah.
you interject wherever you see fit. If I start to touch on something where you want to be like, "Aha, that actually did not happen."
Yeah.
I did a little bit of research and things like I know that he was maybe not an out homosexual, but
Right.
he had gay relationships that may or may not have been known about, or may not have happened.
Okay, can I touch on
yes,
that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this is really interesting because as I was reading the book, I wanted to also back up what it was saying in the book with interviews with Sylvia Nasser to see, just to kind of cross-reference. And this part is very confusing, at least for me, because in the book, she tells how he definitely had relationships with men, but they were purely emotional relationships and they were not sexual in any nature. But there have, like, she profiles a few of the men that he was emotionally invested with. A lot of these relationships were one-sided in the sense that Nash had this infatuation and the person didn't know it, kind of thing. And so, but he would drop hints, but because of the day and age, they kind of like brushed him off, and it was weird. But there was one colleague that he had, Jack Bricker, and he had a very close relationship with Nash to the point where in the book she mentioned that he would like kiss him at MIT, but didn't elaborate on what kind of kissing it was.
Right.
And it was very confusing. And then when I went back and I looked at interviews with Sylvia, she was talking about how other media outlets were talking about how he was gay. And she's like, he's not gay. I didn't say that in the book. He just had emotional relationships with men. And I was like, I don't really understand that part. I was like, I don't know where we're drawing the line here, because in the book they were very, very emotional, and also just like maybe like holding hands and like twirling of hair and things like that. It just didn't really move beyond that.
Yeah.
So, it's a very, very confusing thing. But when I heard about that, and there's one more thing.
Please. I'm into this. Let's go.
About this, because this is something that I'm pretty confused about still. So Nash used to work at this corporation called the Rand Corporation. And this was a facility in Santa Monica that is equivalent to Los Alamos in New Mexico, in the sense that it was like really top secret during the war, and they had all these mathematicians here and all this like crazy underground stuff was going on. And during that time, Nash got arrested in Santa Monica by the Santa Monica Police Department for indecent exposure. And this was at 2 a.m. He was walking along Santa Monica Beach, and he went into a police trap in the bathroom. And something happened with the police decoy, and it was indecent exposure. Now, in the book, it doesn't elaborate on what that is. It kind of, she uses like the person who ended up firing Rand, because during that time, because homosexuality was such a taboo thing, they were just firing people left and right who had any kind of like those tendencies, especially like something that they were charged with. So we really don't know if this was what exactly happened in the bathroom. We just know that he was charged with this, and there was some ideas that, you only get this if you come on to someone or you do something inappropriate.
Right.
So there's also that.
Well, when was the book written?
Let's look it up, because I'm not sure. It had to be the early 2000s.
Yeah, no, you're right. 1998. So just a few years before the movie came out.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because, at that point, early 2000s, I would say like homosexuality was still a little bit taboo.
Right.
And certainly in Hollywood, like I can see how they wanted to gloss over a lot of these gray areas or complicated areas, quote unquote, because to them, they're like, look, let's just focus on his psychological struggles and the relationship with his wife. You start adding these layers and layers of like, oh, was he a homosexual? Wasn't he? Like, what were his relationships? It's just like, I can see how that can get complicated, yes. But I can also see on the other side how that was like, let's not deal with that right now because we want to make money, and we're not sure how American audiences will react to this movie if there's a gay relationship.
they made him very wholesome in the movie.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that he didn't have those, he wasn't wholesome maybe later in life, or maybe he didn't.
He's wholesome in that they're painting him as like he's the hero of the film. And yes, he has flaws in that, like, he's a little short with people, he's a little sarcastic, he doesn't emotionally connect in all the right ways, but the flaws are kind of painted as like he has a good soul deep down, he's a good person, and this is just part of his illness. And you know, it's I agree, they're very it's not a complex characterization. It's he's a good person. Mental illness has messed him up and made him struggle with relationships with people. But overall, nothing about him is bad. He's just like a victim of this illness.
And it gets worse.
Does it?
Not in the fact that homosexuality is not worse. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the fact that they leave out his relationships gets worse, in the sense that he had a girl before Alicia Nash, and he had a child with her, and he completely didn't ignore them, but he hid them away. He did not provide for them.
Wow.
He didn't do anything, and it was because she was of lower class than he was, and she wasn't on the same academic standing. So John Nash, especially younger John Nash, was a huge egoist.
Yeah.
And
that comes across in the film, but like it's painted with a broad, like, this is a egotistical character brush, but we also want to like him, so not too egotistical.
Right. And so that piece was like, when I read that part, because I had heard about it before, but I never really like dug into it. It's bad. Like, she got pregnant. He basically was like, yeah, really excited for a child. Basically, he thinks that you should have kids in order to like pass on your genes, and there should be a bloodline thing. But he basically did not provide for her ever. She had to the point that she had to give up her child to the foster care system because she could not afford him. But she loved John Nash so much. Eleanor is her name. That she still tried to be with him.
She didn't like hold it against him in a way. Like, she was like, well, you know.
Well, she thought that he was going to marry her eventually. She was still very convinced in her head that he was going to marry her one day. And so they would actually go and visit the child, and when they could. But that's like huge. That is something that completely shifts, your outlook on who this person is.
Right.
But yeah, the relationships, he was a rough guy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And like, this film is just, I guess, the motivation for Akiva Goldsman, the screenwriter, who, by the way, has written three of the greatest films of all time. Those would be Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, and Lost in Space, the 1998 film. These are all terrible films. Well, Batman Forever I love, but these are not good movies. But Akiva Goldsman, it is for sure something where I can see a screenwriter wanting to steer away from the more problematic stuff. And I'm so curious about these conversations, because I don't think I think there's a creative justification, but I also think like there is a way you can include that stuff in the story without having it completely bog down the narrative. You can make this guy complex and showcase, like, he's a complex guy already, as far as like, we know he has problems and we know he's not perfect. And I don't think it's too much of a step to then say like, yeah, and he was kind of a womanizer and he was sort of a deadbeat. And then that almost gives Alicia a little even more power, like, to be like, I am with this guy and I'm with him to the end, and I'm going to help see him through this. But I can also see them saying like, look, this is a film about his illness and about that romantic relationship, and we can't let anything else distract from that. It's just the question of like, the difference with, if we're talking about Lord of the Rings, because why not? In a film like Lord of the Rings, when you're adapting from this massive text, you can take a bit more of, you can take more liberties. Like it's fiction, it's fantasy, and you might piss some fans off if you cut out certain characters and certain things, but it's all in the service of the story. In this case, it's the same approach, but because it's about a real person and real people who were hurt, who are just ignored or completely papered over, then there's a whole conversation about what's the moral responsibility of the filmmakers. Do they include all that
Yes.
stuff or not? And are they right or wrong? And I don't think there's an actual, like, I don't think it's right or wrong. I think it's like, well, there's reasons for both. There's reasons to do it and reasons not to do it. And I can see both sides, but I do think it's kind of like that falls in line with the film's overall vibe, which is like, it's a safe film that grandparents can go to and really enjoy and sit down. It's it's a movie for grown-ups, but it's like really, it's like the whole family can go and sit and feel good about life when they come out of this.
Right. And that's exactly what it is. And I appreciate it for that. However, I like want them to do another film about him because he was an extraordinary human being.
Yeah.
He was an extremely flawed human being, but
did you say he was an extremely fly human being?
Yeah, he's so flat. No, flawed. So I would love to just see another film where it would have to be a series. I feel like that would really be able to capture how complex of a human being he was, because yeah, he's fascinating, but there was so many demons that he was fighting.
And I think and I don't want to ruffle your feathers at all, but I think this is where Oppenheimer probably succeeded more than A Beautiful Mind, in that Oppenheimer is painted very much warts and all. We are very aware of his infidelities and his flaws as a human being. Those are kind of front and center. And I don't know the full extent of the story. You know more about Oppenheimer than I do, and you've read more about him than I have. But I think to me, it's like if you compare and contrast, Oppenheimer's the stronger film, but also Oppenheimer is the proof that you can tell that story and still have wide appeal. Like the film takes more risks than A Beautiful Mind, and I think the rewards are greater, but it also won Best Picture. It's like, so it just goes to show you the two types of biopics and how like there are merits to both, but maybe one ends up being a bit more artistically impressive as a result of being willing to take those risks and being a bit more true to itself and the people it's adapting into this story. But I will say this. So I think this falls into that category of film where for a chunk of its runtime, I thought I wasn't going to enjoy it, or that I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I think like the first 20 minutes or so, let's just say this, before he meets Felicia, the film is kind of Alicia, sorry. Yeah. Before he meets Alicia, the film is kind of like, I'm just sort of like, okay, so I guess this is just going to be, we're following this guy and seeing how brilliant he is and kind of how quirky he is and stuff like that. Alicia shows up, and then it kind of turns into like, all right, so Jennifer Connelly is amazing in the movie. So I was very impressed by her performance, and I was more invested in her maybe than Russell Crowe. Yeah. And, I'm getting about like 40, 50 minutes into the movie and kind of feeling like, okay, I kind of think I see where this is going. It feels just like very straightforward biopic and biopic. Sorry, forgive me. But I was kind of just feeling like, what's going on and where is this going? Isn't it just going to be kind of a straightforward, he's brilliant, but he was a little kooky, and but he's going to overcome these things through the power of love. And so I was kind of going along for the ride and like moderately involved, but not super involved. And then where the film really impressed me was the midpoint where they turn on you and say everything you thought you were seeing and everything you thought you knew about these people and the people around him is wrong. And here's what's actually happening. John Nash is mentally ill. He's been hallucinating these people and he needs to be hospitalized. And that's when the movie became really compelling to me. And I also did not realize, because this was spoiled for me almost immediately. And I guess it's hard not to spoil because John Nash is a real person. And when talking about him, you can't not bring up the mental illness. But I didn't realize that the hallucinations were a twist that they pull on you about halfway through the movie. I thought it was something that we knew from the get-go. So there was a part of me that thought, you know what? Nobody's interacting with Paul Bettany. I wonder if he's like, actually, they're going to reveal at the end that he's a hallucination. The little girl, the niece running around in the field, the pigeons don't respond to her. And that's when I started to think like, oh, he's imagining.
Oh, I
them.
didn't catch that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to rewatch it.
You have to go back and watch because she's running around all the pigeons. It's like, well, that's weird that they're not flying. Oh, maybe he's but I didn't realize that the film is actually setting you up for that twist. And I thought that was actually really, really brilliant. I think it's almost a double-edged sword. I think the first half of the film becomes a little bit blander because it is sort of like just straightforward. And then there are these crazy things happening with the government agents and like there's a shootout and it's like, what is this? Like tonally, this movie is kind of jumping all over the place. And then what they do is kind of pull a fast one on you and say, actually, it's this. And then the movie suddenly becomes dark and gray. And we've seen a lot of like autumn, bright colors, lots of amber and yellows. And suddenly we're like in a very like, now it's the real world and we're facing a new reality that the movie manipulates us into thinking one way and then pulls the rug out from under us. And I thought that was brilliant filmmaking, brilliant writing, and really, really brought me into the movie in a way that I was not expecting. Because at that point in a movie, if you're like about 45 minutes in and you're not super into it, you're kind of like, okay, maybe this is just how I'm going to feel throughout. But I think when Jennifer Connelly and Alicia kind of take the reins of the film, when she finally has to kind of be like, oh, I'm going to have to take care of him. And she becomes more of the main character. It's almost like it switches perspectives from it's not his movie anymore. Now it's kind of her movie. That's when it became really compelling to me as a viewer.
So a few things there. One about the switch of how Alicia became kind of the main character of the movie. The great thing about the book, it's a John Nash story, but she focuses so much time and effort on pretty much every single character that is really relevant to John's life. She spends a lot of time on each character in the book. So you almost get a full picture of Alicia, of all of these, of his mom, his dad, all these other mathematicians, these people in his life. And I think that I love that you noted that because of the fact that, that it does feel that way in the film. And I think that it could have been a nod to the book, but I regardless, I also love how they did that. And for the hallucinations, I was thinking about that and I was like, okay, I think maybe a few things as to why they decided to do visual hallucinations over the auditory hallucinations, which is actually one of the main symptoms that he ended up having was because of that twist, right? Like in order to even have that twist, that's going to be really hard to tell on screen if it's just auditory hallucinations.
Yeah,
like, of course. Figure it out.
Well, it's film. It's film too. It's a visual medium. It makes sense for it to be for them to like translate that into a visual thing.
Yeah, and I also think like it's a lot less scary until you even when you do figure out that Charles and the little girl and the government people, they're all hallucinations. It's a lot less scary than I think seeing auditory hallucinations on film. I don't know what it is. But he did hallucinate things about the government. He thought that the government, like in his auditory hallucinations were more so that the government was contacting him because he had to figure out how to make a world government in order to take over the world, and all this really weird stuff. He did think that they were communicating to him through like the Times Magazine and different things. He did assume that people were following him. He did assume that like people in red ties on campus, because he's a pattern person, right? Mathematicians are pattern people. And he would be like, oh, this person, they're trying to tell me something. So those kinds of things were what really happened. And it's interesting because he really did work in a top secret government organization, RAND.
Yeah.
So it just, at some point he, whatever that is, and I think it's hard when talking about any mental illness or any kind of condition in film, because it varies so much from person to person, especially schizophrenia. So from my understanding, visual hallucinations are very rare. Auditory hallucinations are much more common. So you try to get away from those stereotypes as a filmmaker and try not to make tropes. But the visual hallucination thing, like I really had to sit down and think, this is going to add to the stereotype, but I think that it was probably a necessary move on the filmmaker's part.
For dramatic purposes, I think so. Yeah. And I think, ultimately it's not something where, you're definitely right. It turns into that situation of like, how is somebody who maybe actually suffers from this going to perceive this? Are they going to see you kind of glamorizing or romanticizing? And I think because the film is not doing that, because the film is very clearly trying to say like, this isn't a good thing. It works. And it works also, again, like we're saying, it's a movie. It has to visually convey information to the audience. And we also, I think, in order for that twist to work, the narrative twist, you could say, oh, but it's a little bit of a gimmick. I'm like, well, kind of, but it also is very emotionally effective. Whereas the first half of the film is kind of like this sort of almost not fairy tale, but it feels a little fantastical and idyllic. Am I saying that word right? Idyllic?
I think so.
Yeah. It's kind of portraying like, oh, it's wonderful and, all these things. And the film, when it switches moods, it feels on every level, visually, emotionally, it suddenly grounds it in a reality that is very intense and very brutal. Whereas some of the pre-twist, before we find out what's really going on, felt a little maybe phony. Not phony is almost harsh, but it did feel a little bit like I felt like it was a little bit of a facade. Like the film was kind of not fully grounded. And then when we switch, the film suddenly feels very, very grounded, and the emotions are very raw. The pain is very, very real, and it feels like that. And I think because of that, it's what makes it so effective. Is it's not trying to embellish in any of this. It's trying to portray it realistically, and it's using what cinema is so brilliant at, like at its best. You emotionally manipulate an audience, and you use all the tools at your disposal to tell the story visually. And that's why I think that works so well. And then we really, again, like I said, I enjoyed Russell Crowe's performance. I think it's really cool that this is the role that he took on after a movie like Gladiator, where he's like, the big muscular badass who's going to take out all these guys. This is a very vulnerable role. It's a very different role. He is not an invulnerable badass. He is very, very vulnerable and kind of emotionally naked. But Jennifer Connelly, I feel like, really steals the show here. Like when I found out that Russell Crowe didn't win the Oscar and she did, it made me very, very happy, because I feel like she really is the one who brings this movie home. And I don't know, maybe some of Crowe's mannerisms feel a little, it's not like he's overplaying it, but sometimes, and I don't know, like, it's like, I don't know John Nash. I don't know, in my own life, I don't know how people with schizophrenia would exhibit behaviors that maybe Crowe, who probably studied a lot of this, was exhibiting. Some of it felt a little exaggerated to me, like, oh, it's an actor putting on a performance of somebody with this mental illness.
I actually felt that he did. I mean, I've never obviously met John Nash, or I've only read a book about it, but from my inkling of the book, I think he did a really great portrayal of him. I think that he actually toned it down a lot, because John Nash, from what I've learned, he kind of is that stereotypical mathematician that puts you down all the time. That's like, you're not as smart as me. Like, I
Right.
don't even, like, he would do this thing where when people would talk to him and he didn't think it was worthwhile, he would just not talk back to them. He would just be silent until they went away.
That's also that's not a uniquely mathematician thing. I feel like that's any brilliant, like whether you're a filmmaker or a musician, that seems to cross the boundary. All brilliant people can be assholes sometimes.
Yeah, that's the thing. It really is. It really is like this interesting thing that happens with people that are on the scale of, John Nash. I do think that he was probably a little bit more brash. He was pretty notorious in, at MIT and Princeton, where he was a graduate student, and he ended up being an instructor at MIT. Is that he was extremely brash,
Right.
and he would say things that I would say might be construed as bigotry. So I that is something else that they didn't portray very much in the
Right.
the movie. But anyway, to say about Russell Crowe's performance, I think that I maybe I have to rewatch the film, and I feel like this is one of those films that you have to watch a million times after you read the book.
Yeah, and also, like I said, I have no frame of reference. So I may, like, if I
Yeah.
actually were to, like, I'm sure there is probably somewhere some actual like video or audio uh interview of
Mm.
the real John Nash available on YouTube. I didn't look at
Oh
any
yeah.
of that
Yeah.
stuff. So I'm sure you could find it and probably find the similarities and then actually say, like, I'm just pulling this out of like what I gathered from the film. I have literally no reference. So it could be like exactly what you're saying. It probably is, where it's like, yeah, actually he toned it down. He did a pretty good job. I will say I was more, it may have been part of the creative direction, because once again, I felt like when we got into the part of the film that is more grounded in reality, where
Mm.
Alicia kind of takes over, his performance suddenly became more interesting to me, because it
Mm.
maybe what I was reacting to negatively in the first part of the film was this feeling of almost like they were not glamorizing him, but because
Mm.
that part of the film is a little bit more like a fairy tale version of the story before we find out what's really going on. Um, that's kind of maybe the way he plays it. And then in the second half of the film, it feels like his mannerisms and his behaviors are a little less like, they're kind of played for laughs and a little bit, oh, he's kind of charming in this like cute little way in the first half of the film. And in the second half of the film, it feels more like this is a man who's disturbed and really struggling. So I found the second half of the film, even in his performance, to be more effective. So
Yeah.
again, maybe that was part of the plan. Maybe that was the intention.
And I think when I watched the film too, initially before I read the book, I was like, I love the one of the things that I love about the film was that he was charming, but then after reading the book, I was like, oh, he was only charming to like a few people.
Yes.
So they really played up the fact that there was a few people that saw him as like this charming individual.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
What stands out to you about the film that particularly connected with you, like when you first saw
mm,
it, that made it such an important film for you emotionally? And I know, like, you are very well read and very into science and kind of the world that this film is portraying, and it's
mm.
certainly more mathematically focused. But what do you think, as far as the emotional core, what spoke to you the most about the film and what made it a personal favorite of yours?
um, I think it was. I think it was a few things. One is I love stories that um, talk about the human condition and these things where these really horrible things like a mental illness can come in and derail someone's life. And I find it very fascinating when someone so brilliant goes through something like this. And so that kind of triumph of humans being able to overcome something that they are afflicted with has always really spoke to me. But another thing is that it was a love story, and I think that I really admired the movie in the sense that there was strong love there,
Yeah.
and those really hard decisions that humans have to go through in order to protect their loved ones. So it's like a whole humanity thing. I think is
Yeah.
the emotional thing. It's hard to pin down one exact, or even just a few emotions that I really gravitated towards. But I think the biggest thing is the human condition and just love, right?
Yeah.
Is those things are always something that I enjoy consuming as an audience member.
Yeah. Speaking to those points, I think one, the love story, what I enjoy about it is it's not dumbed down at
Mm.
all. It felt a little bit like at the beginning I thought like, oh, it's just going to be like, oh, the inspirational story of like the wife who stuck with her husband through thick and thin. And it becomes more, it does ultimately kind of end up being that at the end, but it's portrayed in a sensitive, thoughtful way. And through the performances and the writing, you really get the sense of like what Alicia is going through and the struggles
Mm.
and the things she like, the decisions she has to make. One of the moments that really stressed me out, and probably stressed me out more now as a dad than it would have
Mm.
before, was the baby in the bathtub scene, which is like just so horrifying to think of. But I think her reaction in that moment, and then like just the sheer terror and fear of that, and then like her decision afterwards to still care for him and listen to him and
Okay.
understand, that willingness to understand, is really, it's portrayed really beautifully and really sincerely in a way that I
Mm.
think kind of speaks to Ron Howard's abilities as a filmmaker and Akiva Goldsman's abilities as a writer and the performances, because I think they're in lesser hands that could have felt really like sappy or saccharine, and it
Mm.
doesn't. It feels very, very sincere, and you really feel um, the struggle, Alicia's struggle and
Mm.
her pain. Like, she has moments where she's like, I'm just going to leave this guy. Like, I need to get out. And when she makes the decisions not to, you do feel like there's something real and genuine behind it. And then speaking to your other point about like science versus the human spirit, or like, how humans can overcome things that are in their way, the obstacles in their way. I do think like the study of science, which is so grounded in reality and proving things and formulas and things like that, and the human spirit, to me, uh, is so much more elusive than that. And this film is kind of finding that balance of like the human spirit is capable of things that science can't explain,
Mm.
and that is kind of at the center of this film. Like, love is something that this film is saying uh, is so important and so crucial to the survival of humanity, that it can really, really shape how we live in the world, and how we make it through, and how we deal with certain obstacles in our path. So I really I just love that in general. And that's something in real life too, something where I think like I have always appreciated science and I love science, but I also love that there are things that science can't explain. And I think that that kind of thing is one of them.
Yeah, and science is a tool, right? It's not meant to it's never going to 100% prove anything. There's always going to be variations. There's always going to be a small variable in anything. So I think that what this film also does really well, and one of the reasons why I was so fascinated by it, was the juxtaposition of science being rooted in reality versus someone who is literally in the field who has a break in reality. And
Mm-hmm.
you see this struggle between people who love each other about two different realities that they're living in. And it just blows my mind every single time I think about it, because the concept of reality is something that I am extraordinarily fascinated with. And I love to read about and I love to learn about. And when it comes to mental illness, there are these breaks in reality, and you watch this and you think, what is real? How do you Descartes is I think therefore I am. Have you ever heard of that famous? And that kind of it explores the idea of basically the way that he arrived at I think therefore I am was because of the fact that he went through this really tough mental time where he was questioning everything, right? And he didn't know whether a demon was putting ideas into his head, and he didn't know what was real. So he came to the conclusion that even if the demon is putting thoughts into my brain, those thoughts are mine and I own them. Therefore, I think, therefore I am.
I didn't know that story. That's amazing.
Yeah. So those kind of like concepts of this like shared hallucination, which is what normals, right, look at reality as, and then there's these breaks of reality. It makes you think like, what is real?
Yeah.
Also,
it also is like, I don't think the mind is such a complex thing, and we are understanding bits and pieces, and also there's like a whole universe of things we still don't understand about it. And it's just like, how far is any of us really from like reaching that breaking point of like, like you're saying, like, what is real? Like, what is your reality? And even now, like, somebody with quote unquote a fully functioning healthy brain is still perceiving things through their own perspective that is unique to them. So it's like our realities are all our own and not necessarily definitive.
Right. We're literally blind to most of the light in the universe, right? We see a tiny little sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum, and the rest of it is completely invisible to us. So our reality is different to a bee's reality, is different to a snake's reality.
Yeah.
So those are it's really, really interesting. And what's even more like, I think one of the most fascinating things about this movie and John Nash is what he won his Nobel Prize in. And I don't know if you know much about his work.
No, I think, and I want you to finish this thought because I want to know, because I think another thing I would nitpick about the movie is that it doesn't do a great job explaining what John Nash actually accomplished to like somebody like me, like, or I'm like, okay, he's very smart and very like eccentric. And he's clearly doing things that are impressing people, but I have no idea what these things are. And maybe that's just the reality of like his particular area of expertise. How do you demonstrate that to an audience? It's all mathematics. So that might be part of the problem, but I did feel like the film didn't do a great job explaining what exactly he's praised so much for.
Yeah, and it didn't, but it did leave scenes in the movie that hinted at what he won, which is a conversation, right? Like, is it better that he didn't do exposition and talk about like what he did, or is it more fun to learn about him and then rewatch it and be like, oh, that's where they talked about it,
right? And that's something you can pick up from the book too, as well. Right. Like you can, as you learn more about him, it's like, it's not something that makes or breaks the movie, but it was something where I was for a while, I was like, okay, but why John Nash? Like other than the fact that it's like, oh, this mental illness that he overcame and fought against, like I was trying to figure, I had to go back and read like some of the stuff and like, oh, okay, he came up with this theory and that and all this stuff, like learning, oh, these amazing accomplishments. And I'm sure that would enrich my viewing experience going back to it. But it was, again, it's probably just the nature of the subject itself. Like what he's accomplishing is something you can't tangibly, it's not the atomic bomb, it's not something you can tangibly say like, I know what that is and I know what it ended up doing. In this case, it's a little bit harder to say like, yes, he came up with these amazing theories like game theory and things, and here's how it applies to normal life. So I sympathize, and also it was difficult for me to say like, what was the accomplishment here? So
it's so funny because when I had first watched it, I had no idea. Like, I was like, oh, he won a Nobel Prize in something. I don't even know.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Joseph was not watching it with me, but he walked in on the scene where John is with the other mathematicians in the bar and they're talking about the girls. And he's like, this is, if we all went for all the girls and not the blonde one, we would all win, basically. Right. And without him knowing really what the film was, he said, oh, that's game theory, because he is an economist.
Great. Yeah.
So that's the way that Ron Howard puts those hints of what he won. There's a lot of moments that exercise what game theory is. And so John won the Nobel Prize for economic science in game theory. He wasn't the father of game theory. That was John von Neumann, but he did a lot of, he contributed to the field a lot. And basically it's actually when you think about it, you're kind of like, how did he win a Nobel Prize for that? But these things weren't thought of back then. But basically, game theory is used in economics to mathematically, not like predict, but teaches you how to play the game of, ironically, interactions between two or more people. So if you think of like negotiations or military, and you think, okay, I need to figure out how to get this from this person, or I need to figure out how to play the field on a war game. How do I do that? Well, there's a group of mathematicians that work in economics that have literally devised formulas, mathematic proofs to be able to say, this is what you do in those situations in order to play the game.
Interesting.
And so
well, I can see, thinking about it, like him, like early on in the movie. Early on in the movie when he's talking about the pigeons, like, I'm coming up with a formula for why the pigeons are doing this thing. I can't remember exactly what it is, but you're absolutely right. There are actual demonstrations of him saying, like, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because his whole story is the fact that he doesn't interact with humans very well. But he knows math.
Yeah.
And so he won the Nobel Prize in game theory to mathematically be able to model how humans interact in situations.
That is crazy. Yeah, that is absolutely insane.
So.
And very, very ironic and kind of a funny thing. It speaks to his brilliance. I literally just looked at the Wikipedia page and realized that Roger Deakins shot this, which I did not know. Roger Deakins is arguably our greatest living cinematographer, certainly in the conversation to be the best, but he's done a ton of my favorite movies and I admire that guy so much. So sorry, that's a completely random aside. I just happened to see that.
I love
now.
it.
Yeah, I don't know. I was watching the movie, the credits. I watched the credits. I guess I was not paying attention. I wanted to ask you, just in terms of, again, scientific reality, and this is a very interesting dilemma the film presents. And this is what we were talking about. What's your moral responsibility versus what's dramatically interesting? And in this case, it's the flip side of the argument we were talking about earlier on, which is the medication, the mention of medication. So in reality, John Nash decided to forego all medication and naturally kind of dealt with his internal demons and illness and overcame it to the best of his ability and ultimately kind of defeated it on his own without any medical intervention. Right. I can certainly see why Akiva Goldsman and Ron Howard probably thought that was a little bit problematic. Right. I think the discussion was, we can't make a movie where it's about a schizophrenic who stops taking his medicine and that makes him it heals him
Right.
completely fixes his problems. Because then how many people would try to emulate that? Like, oh yeah, the medicine's part of the problem. And certainly and especially in this day and age with everything that's happening politically, it's like that's very, very problematic to start to encourage people to say, hey, don't take your meds. You'll be just fine.
Totally.
On the one side, I want to believe that because I don't want to invest in the idea that everyone always is going to need medical intervention and to be on whatever medications for the rest of their lives, because I think there is a nefarious idea behind that, sadly. But I also understand why it's very problematic to express, which it was the reality, but also I think to broadcast in the form of a story or a film to say like, hey, if you stop taking your medication, it could fix all of your problems. That's what happened. But sorry, I got so excited I ripped out my earbud. That's what happened. But like, I wanted to get your thoughts on that moral dilemma, that kind of like, how do you handle something like that? Did they handle it correctly?
I think that they probably did the right thing. I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist. I am not a neurologist. I don't work with the brain. I'm very fascinated by the brain. But from my understanding, what John did in his real life, his way of literally being able to logic his way out of schizophrenia, just not, he basically didn't acknowledge the voices, and they eventually kind of went away, this is not something that is normal for many people. And obviously there's different types of severity when it comes to this. And I think that John definitely had bouts of pretty severe stuff, but it's hard. I think that the filmmakers probably did the best thing in the sense that people do watch films and go, I can do that.
Yeah. Or they're like, oh, it's based on a true story, therefore everything in this movie is true and happened.
And it's so nuanced person to person that I think by their choice of having him take the medication, that it was probably the right thing. I think it was probably the right thing to do, because John Nash was an amazing, incredible person. His brain was beautiful.
Yeah.
Hey. But he I don't know. I don't know if he was an exception. So
I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here either. I think it's a very complex question and a very complex issue. And like you said, I think the filmmakers probably made the right choice. And this is a debate that is still causing consternation across the country, across the world. Couple other random things about the movie. These are just random snippets that I have no way of fitting into the conversation organically, but I did write down. I appreciated that Adam Goldberg and Anthony Rapp, who are two of his college besties, they were in Dazed and Confused together as besties in high school. And
I've never seen Dazed and Confused.
You should. I am a massive Richard Linklater fan. This is not news to anybody. Dazed and Confused is not one of my favorite movies, but I appreciate it and I enjoy it. It's not my favorite, but I do enjoy it. But it was cool that the two of them were in this movie as like, now they're college buddies. So it's like they graduated, and in Dazed and Confused, they're kind of like the nerdy kids. They're kind of like the outcast kids. So it's like, they graduated and went to college to study nerdy science stuff. I enjoyed that a lot. So what else did I enjoy? There's a Bryce Dallas Howard cameo in the movie that I caught and then later confirmed on IMDb when he is being taken away for the first time. He's been sedated and he's put in the car. As he's looking out the window while he's driving away, there's a redhead kind of right at the front of the crowd. And I was like, that looks like Bryce Dallas Howard. And it is Bryce Dallas Howard. I also want to point out something that drives me nuts in many, many, many films is old person makeup. When they apply old person makeup to young people, one of the example that is leaping to my mind is Guy Pearce in Prometheus. it drives me crazy because what happens, it's partly performance because he's like, yes, I am an old man. And like, it's very ridiculous. A Beautiful Mind, I would rank way up high on the list of like best old person makeup I've seen in a film. Jennifer Connelly has old person makeup that is a little bit more like what annoys me, but I think the makeup on Russell Crowe is like spot on. I think it's some of the best old person makeup I've ever seen. And then, I just finding out that Roger Deakins shot it is very exciting because I love him. But are there any other like just completely random tidbits that we haven't touched on that you think merit a mention here?
No, except I like how they ended the movie. I will say that.
I love just the two of them walking off together.
Yeah, because he I don't know how much longer it was that he died with his wife. They got in a car accident.
That's right. Yeah, I read that.
So they kind of like left together from another award ceremony. I don't think it was the Nobel Prize. I think it was maybe the Abel Prize. But he was literally leaving a ceremony when they got a taxi and the taxi crashed.
Oh, it's so sad.
So that was a beautiful way to end the film, I think.
Yeah, it's a very quiet kind of the film, for a film that in some ways kind of hits you over the head with some of its emotional decisions. It was a very nice, subtle way. Because the scene before that where he gets the award, it's like the cliche, like everyone, yes, we love you. Like everyone's crying and it's a little like, okay, I get that it's probably what happened, but it is a little sappy. So to end it on that kind of quieter note, they could have had that be the ending where it's like the text comes up on screen while everyone is applauding him. Like John Nash went on to do all these things. So I really, really love and appreciate that it just ends on that quiet moment of the two of them deciding to leave the ceremony together. That was a very nice touch and a very sweet way to end that movie. Anything else?
I will say, out of all of the things that they didn't capture from, I do think that the film captured probably the best parts of John Nash. And I do think that there were best parts of him, and he was a very complex human being. And but he was extraordinarily brilliant. Oh my gosh. One of the things that happens in the books is she tends to go into the formulas a little bit and talks about what they mean. And he really was just an amazingly creative person and human. And, as I said, I think it's important to read up on the people that you admire from these films. But I think the film did a very good job at capturing the best of John Nash.
Yeah, ultimately, any adaptation, whether it's of a true story or a not true story, I think what makes the most successful adaptations successful is if at the very least, no matter what the changes are, they capture the spirit of the material they're adapting.
Yeah.
And I think it's clear that this is, no matter like if there's gray areas or certain things that we've already touched on that were not brought into the film, the overall spirit of the story of John Nash and what he accomplished and who he was, I feel like the film did a really good job capturing that essence and was successful overall. So anything else that we missed or what we want to give our final ratings?
I'm trying to think if there's anything else that was particularly missed. I don't think so. I just really encourage people to read the book. And I hope that you read the book, because I have been absolutely, I read 14 hours in 3 days or something.
I read 14 hours in 14 hours. Yeah. I have not slept. I've just been listening to this book for the past 14 hours.
It's that fascinating. And I think, I would just be interested in, to hear from your viewers, and your audience, what they think of the movie after they read the book, because it really, truly is just an amazing, overview of someone's life. But just keep in mind, Sylvia Nasser did not interview John Nash in the book. So
yes,
that's
but he liked it enough that he wanted to be her friend afterwards.
Yeah,
So that's certainly a good sign. That's a thumbs up from Mr. Nash as far as I'm concerned. All right, well, final ratings. What should our rating system be? Game theories? How many game theories would you give?
I don't know.
How many game theories? How many amazing old people makeups would you give? How many formulas would you concoct in favor of A Beautiful
It needed
Mind?
more math. I wanted to see more math.
More math. More math. Yes. Let's just say how many amazing old people makeups, old person makeup would you give on a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest? How many? Just maths. How many maths would you give it on a scale from 1 to 5?
How many meths?
How many maths? Maths. MATHS, not meths.
What does that mean? I'm not sure. I don't know how many maths mean.
How many maths? Just don't question it. Just go with it.
Let's see. If X equals 2, then Y equals 5. So that means that it's a 3.
A 3. Okay, I'll give it a little bit more, and I'll give it a 3.5.
Yeah,
that's
fair.
The half really, I think, is for Jennifer Connelly because she's so good in this movie.
True. She is phenomenal.
But this has been wonderful, Amber. Thank you as always for bringing your wonderful, amazing personality and expertise to the episode. I sincerely appreciate it. And why don't you tell the good folks at home where they can find you and follow all the cool stuff that you do if they so desire?
Yeah, so if you want to follow in any of my space journeys, if you want to learn about astronomy and have little bouts of existential meltdowns with me about how I think about reality and what it is, you can follow me on Instagram at Amber _Rosario ROSARIO, and that's on Instagram and YouTube.
Yay. And I am at Shawn Doorman on Twitter. I still am not calling it X. I'll just call it Twitter. And I'm Shawn Doorman 05 on Letterboxd. You can go there to see all my film reviews and ratings and things like that. So yes, thank you. Thank you, Amber. Thank you everyone for listening. And we will see you at the movies.